Brilliant, thank you. Appreciate the introduction. So I don't need to tell you who I am. I'm a learning technologist and I'm actually in a STEM faculty in UE. So it's a huge faculty of nurses predominantly and biosciences, biomedical, environmental science. So I'm going to speak to my personal story as a student in UK education and then my own view of what happens in the education institutions that I've worked in. To start off with, I often wonder why I agree to do these things. There's a part of me that's really uncomfortable at the thought of speaking into the void in this way. So when I agree to do them, I generally kick myself afterwards, especially as the deadline grows closer and I haven't even started. Of course, I would have done a lot of blue sky thinking, imagining conversations with myself or conversations with others, lots of research, all the bits that I really love doing. But I've still got to do the terrifying actual writing, organising, creating a coherent story to do. And then even worse, pushing it out there or facing doing it in public. That's a constant fear and trial for me. So please bear with me. I decided that the best way for me to address this is to align it with my own story, because that's what I know, that's what I can talk about. So where do I start? So in the early years at school, I arrived able to read, which then wasn't a problem. Sadly, when my own children did, it was viewed as one. I did, however, find the rigidity of the structure of school difficult. I was confused by it and often rebellious, but I loved the process of learning new things and exploring and testing everything. Every day, something new would capture and distract me. I loved reading. In fact, my focus on reading was so great that my mum took me to have my hearing tested 3 times. I was completely focused on what I was doing. As many neurodiverse people, I was capable of shutting out the world, able to focus on what I was most interested in to an extraordinary degree and to the point I didn't hear. The rest of the time, I was distracted by everything, and nothing much has changed in that regard. Assessment, though, was always an issue for me. When my time came to do the 11 plus, I was expected to fly through it. I did scrape through it, but it literally was scraped through it. I still remember some of the questions which I couldn't hope to answer. They were based on cultural references I had no experience of, being from a Dutch household. The consequences of this were, I learned 1, that teachers weren't infallible, and 2, that I was stupid. So despite passing the 11 plus, I didn't get to go to the local grammar school. There just wasn't room. So I and the 30 others there was no room for ended up in one class in the roughest, toughest comprehensive in town. And that set the tone. We were set apart from the rest of the population for that first year, and it was hard. Bullied for difference. Even the form teacher was a bully. However, I was really lucky at that school. I had a series of teachers in particular subjects who were incredibly supportive, who opened my eyes to being able to learn in different ways. They encouraged my interests in things that weren't really part of the curriculum for that subject. That's something I've experienced throughout my life. Teachers and support staff have gone out of their way to help me get through it, and I'm forever grateful for them. Every tiny thing we do to support our students helps and can make a massive difference to them. So I had to go on to the local sixth form college to do O-levels, which I did in 1 year. Which I did in 1 year, and I completed those and then dropped out of college because I couldn't afford to stay on. I went to sporadically sign on and then work in a series of jobs. I did this for a couple of years, and then my teachers from the sixth form college supported me to go back. This was really unusual at that point. They went out of their way to make it happen. Extraordinary people doing extraordinarily kind things to support me to get through it. So I passed my A-levels, but again, apart from the fine art A-level, I didn't perform at the level that I was expected to. All through the courses, I was expected to get straight A's. Came to the exams, I just couldn't do it. Except with the art. Straight A, and had some of my work taken to a national library. So I was advised to go to art school, and it was fab. As it was fine art, it was largely self-directed work, except for the dissertation. It was the 1980s, microfiche in libraries, papers in dusty vaults, no computers or internet access. I had to type and bind a 10,000-word dissertation. For the next 20-odd years after that, I had a chaotic series of jobs, a mixture of short-lived passions: furniture restorer, postie, fundraiser, video audio production for live events, plus lots of what historian Rick Bregman calls bullshit jobs. Excuse my language. I spent much of my time frustrated, confused, annoyed, and just out and out bored. I constantly changed roles as work availability allowed. The noughties arrived. Living with the serious mental health issues of my partner prompted me to return to studies to investigate psychology. However, ended up doing biosciences at the University of Bristol and loved it. I was finally assessed and diagnosed in the second year of that degree. At last, relieved to understand my hearing impairment, obscure auditory dysfunction, and shocked by the dyslexia and Erlen syndrome diagnoses, with processing speeds just 4% of the national average. I had no idea reading didn't look like that to everyone else, and it all explains so much. I received my DSA award and weighed down with an incredibly heavy laptop with Windows Vista and 1 gig of RAM. I wasn't allowed to connect it to the university intranet because Vista caused so many issues. It took all the RAM too, so I couldn't run anything else on it at the same time, including Claro, Dragon, Inspiration packages. The company that provided it had partitioned the drive and set up one side with a load of advertising junk. I had to strip it out, buy and max out the RAM, 2 gig, and it still barely worked and was always hard to wrangle. I didn't need reading glasses then. However, I also got Erlen lenses, and these were a revelation and made a huge difference to my working stamina and speed. I had extra time, plus various paraphernalia. The Olympus recording device was hugely popular with my cohort, but amplified issues for me, as most of my teachers still managed to talk to the blackboard somehow. I was also awarded a supported note taker, though they were never able to find a suitably qualified one for the level of STEM science, so I never actually saw one. I graduated from the PSET PGCE teacher training and taught biosciences in a further education college in Newport city centre. My students were very diverse, with a greater than average number with specific support needs. The college drew from an economically deprived area, Newport and the South Wales valleys. I tried really hard to provide extra support, design my VLE course to be as accessible as possible. And I didn't have enough support or training for me as staff or for students as learners. So many gaps in the system. Then I crossed over to the dark side. I hadn't noticed, but in further education, but the higher education world is not only huge, it's peculiar and complex in structure with lots of siloed, stratified communities. It was all new and alien and bewildering to me as an outsider. I took a temporary role as a learning technologist at UE to develop and enhance my digital and learning design skills, while I tried to find a new full-time permanent teaching post. I worked on learning, course and content design at UE. I then got a job at University of Bristol designing MOOCs for future learn courses. I loved it. I was fascinated by the possibilities of online courses, theoretically more accessible to many. I learned that's not necessarily so. I then returned to UE and pursued improved digital accessibility and digital capabilities for all staff and students since. So in my work, I've supported staff and student accessibility, designing appropriate workflows, integrating with our digital toolset for teaching and working. I've personally encountered the medical model-informed approach from occupational health. The focus is often a technology can solve this specified issue. This approach neglects considering the person as a whole being. They're living and functioning in both the working and wider social reality. It also never addresses the barriers our processes, systems, and technology provisions create. If I was cynical, I'd suspect a vested interest in continuing with this status quo. So much money is made out of many of these tech solutions. Supporting accessibility requires a more holistic, inclusive and collaborative approach, including redesigning workflows, program and course-specific tools, assessments and content generators, as well as the individual's personal preferences for working and studying. I've seen how we intend to support students transitioning from further education into higher education. I've seen it work and I've seen it fail, whether students have been identified with access needs or not. Megan Hector at Policy Connect wrote the recent Arriving at Thriving report on disabled students' experiences of education. Our findings suggest that many disabled students have experienced problems accessing digital course content. This disrupts their access to teaching and learning and their ability to succeed in education, which has a knock-on effect to their life after graduation as well. And I can confirm that from my own experience. We need to listen to students. In this year's National Clearing Survey report, including some of the pandemic period, key findings were that number one, online learning quality is the number one concern for students in clearing. Mental health and confidence, the two biggest barriers to students accessing HE, came up second. The majority of clearing students felt unsure about at least one aspect of their university choice, which is concerning. Many students transitioning from FE to HE will not have been assessed for a disability issue. Many will have struggled, but not declare it or seek assessment. And many will be halfway through the degree course before getting assessed. Students identified before joining university are sometimes let down by the processes. Gaps in the systems and structures in HE institutions can cause issues. Often support is not in place when the student begins the course, and this delay severely impacts on outcomes. Continuity and progression support is a real issue, as needs, course provision and requirements can change over 3 or 4 years. A lack of clear responsibilities and defined roles, with poor cross-communication within institutional teams and across institutions, these can and do fail to provide the support needed. A case in point, identified a student with severe visual challenges in a digital learning induction I was running. The student was pre-identified before joining a level 0 course for a 4-year program. Their condition was progressive. They already required magnification and at a level that a whole word on the laptop screen was barely manageable. So a screen reader would be essential within the first year. They were undertaking a STEM degree requiring use of sophisticated packages as part of the program, including SPSS. They were awarded magnification software for the laptop and narrator as screen reader. They were given minimal training and support for use of screen readers. SPSS itself requires JAWS to work to full access. Disability support teams didn't have too much access to academic staff on the course, other than to flag up student with specific need under the Equality Act. Academics themselves often have no idea of what the access issue is, how it may impact on learning interactions, or how the assistive technologies and course technologies will work together. So we're left trying to address these kinds of gaps as individuals by networking within the institution. You need to have been in place and connecting for years to be able to do that. This is not sustainable. We need to redesign the structures and systems so these gaps don't occur. So the public sector bodies' websites and mobile applications legislation gives us an opportunity to redress the issues and legacy of previous initiatives. We could focus on addressing the systemic errors that lead to poor support and outcomes, reducing the frequency and severity of failures. So until the PSBOUT are fully realised in the everyday experience of people, facilitated by people like the dynamic duo Alistair McNaught and AbilityNet's maturity model, we will need to be pushing its progress by working together. And this is a perpetual, collaborative, and should be inclusive process. Nothing about us without us. Policies, structures, and practice developed by including all users' lived experience. Things we could do. We could help our consumers of accessible education with a simple, navigable model. Create a positive feedback loop to stimulate institutional response. Create and share a set of priorities and questions when choosing a university and a specific course. I remember making lists of pros and cons for courses myself. I had no one to help me make choices to understand the information I was given, no family or friends with this level of educational experience. So the kinds of questions and pros and cons questions we could include could be, does the website and digital learning environment have accessibility statements? Need to review them and quality assure them. Have a look at George Rhodes' map of badges for public institutions. Look at the brochures. Are they written in plain English? Do they talk about accessibility? Do they link to statements and policies in the institution? Are there course-specific accessibility statements? Does it include directions on the minimum standards for technologies required to engage in the particular program or course? On the open days, ask about disability support and digital accessibility in the library services, in disability services, the student union, academic and assessment systems. Also on open days, ask academics and students about digital accessibility support in the program of study. Ask for recent examples. Ask them how are accessibility issues reported and resolved in courses. Also at open days, ask how courses of interest are created. Is it a cross-discipline team? Members from the library, learning technology, designing, academics, quality assurance, and student representatives. Once at university, we could extend existing support with accessibility buddy schemes to share experiences, skills, and signpost resources and support. We could provide a safe community environment space, both physical and digital, similar to our staff disability networks. We could even link the staff and student disability networks at times to share content and experiences. There's a huge commonality of issues and experiences between staff and students, and we could make more of that. So one of the areas that really concerns me with accessibility and disability support and equity of experience is assessment. It's a really big area of concern. Making assessment accessible and inclusive is a massive challenge. As long ago as 2006, the year I started my bioscience undergraduate degree, Technologist's final report on accessibility in e-assessment was published, and the report made recommendations for accessible and inclusive practice to awarding bodies, software suppliers, developers, and centres offering e-assessments. They were recommended to the QCA in the 4 UK countries for adoption as national guidance. This was specific to on-screen timed assessments leading to qualifications, so it didn't cover alternative digital assessment practice like e-portfolios. Now, I was supposed to do the first e-assessments in my first year exams in the School of Biological Sciences that year. It didn't work, so we had to switch exam to paper. The pandemic hiatus has given us a space to consider more radical redrawing of the long-standing model of assessment orthodoxy. I'm really looking to open up and expand the discourse around this, so I don't want to be too specific or limited. I'm hoping to facilitate a move to more learner-centered assessment, where they drive their own assessment for learning, giving them control of it, offering them the freedom to present their learning in a way that makes sense for them. The existing structures and systems would become unmanageable, and in the current technocratic, data and politically driven models of assessment, existing investment in these is a major barrier to change. But if we applied with the PSBAR intent, where access for all is driven by universal design for inclusivity, it would need minimal adjustments in use, as there would be few built-in hurdles. It would flex and adjust as we progress practice and understanding. And this is a shift in social and cultural behaviours, expectations and desired outcomes. It's been building slowly for a very long time. And it started accelerating as technological development and new hurdles arose. We're mid-major shift with conflicting drives. So we're in a patrician controlling data-driven conforming model, which to me seems the antithesis of what learning and education is, with an opposing drive of open, collaborative, inclusive and cross-communicative model led by researchers, teachers, students and communities. As a scientist, I'm not saying there is no place for data and analysis. There is. More that we are losing the balance and objectivity. It's important we see more evidence of abuses of data and analysis, as we see more abuses of data and analysis. So how do we open up a conversation and plan to redress this imbalance? I'd like to start by sharing some of the reading resources and sessions that I have connected with. We need to think about what messages of self-worth we are instilling in students through our assessment methods. I caught this in my wonky digest yesterday. Synchronicity, we're all thinking about it in the whole sector. I know the internal truth of this assessment methods are still instilling appalling messages re self-worth. I don't want to see it continuing to hurt our students or our staff. Jan expressed what I was thinking so clearly, I deleted what I'd written for this slide. If a student has no chance in their university assessment to recognise their work as socially useful and to see others recognise it as such, then this is a very diminished educational experience. Authentic assessment often conflates the real world with the world of work. As the educational philosopher Christopher Winch has observed, work is an important part of our well-being, but this does not mean that the world of work is the only thing of importance. Authentic assessment is seriously undermined if it becomes a proxy for what employers want. Assessment should encourage both the confidence to not conform and the necessary judgment to see our own contributions in the context of others. So on this slide, I'm sharing some pertinent recent readings or events. They cover everything, and open, inclusive practices and trialling of different approaches with universal design for learning. We need to ensure that students are fully informed and actively contributing. Otherwise, there's a risk of them feeling like guinea pigs in some arcane experiment. I've frequently felt like that at different points in my own education. So this poster is from Kate Lister at the Open University. It's part of the Wellbeing in the Curriculum project data it's based on, where mental health and assessment barriers are being experienced by students are reported in her research themes. The themes included exams, collaborative work, presentations, deadlines. 62% felt assessment was a barrier to well-being, and that rose to 71% for those disclosing a mental health condition. Both of these are higher than life circumstances. It's an institution where all of the students are adults, with all of the concomitant responsibilities and difficulties that life circumstances bring. So the growing focus on mental health is evidenced by collaborations such as the assistive technology Find My Flow and the charity Student Minds, and Microsoft's growing well-being toolset. So we need to consider a positive change to support mental health can be made both by addressing current practices and in providing positive courses or models or modules as part of all programs. For that, you can see the outcome of Bristol University's happiness course in today's Guardian. The current system of assessment is breaking people. It frequently fails to engage with authentic learning. Where's the value in it? Let's take the opportunity to refocus on a humane assessment for learning, encouraging diverse, inclusive and social communities of lifelong learners able to appreciate the joy of discovery. So that's the end of what I wanted to say. All of the links will be included in the PowerPoint file, which I can share with Craig, and with the transcript, which I can share with Craig after that.
Yeah, thank you, Ghizzi. That was fantastic. Thank you. First of all, I was impressed that when you the transcript filtered out the swear words. That was quite impressive. that was really good. But I was just thinking about I've worked in FE and I've worked in HE supporting students, and I've also spent some time as a DSE technology trainer. And all those things that you say are reminiscent of things that were happening 10, 15 years ago. So it's, yeah, thank you. Yeah, Charlie's just said, love to hear your whole story. So if you have any questions for Ghizzi, please pop them into the chat pane just now, and we can we can discuss any questions. Gary's saying, thank you, particularly interested in the inclusive assessment slide, further reading info. Yeah, it's a pain because the way that Blackboard works, the links aren't active, but we send Ghizzi's presentation out, you'll get the links will be live on that. So thank you. Carol, wow, I listened intently the whole way through. So did I. Very passionate. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Heather, thanks for this. Gilly, thank you. You said it's powerful and food for thought. Yeah, I agree.
I'm using.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I can see that, Louis.
Yeah,
I'm using PowerPoint, and rather than sharing the PowerPoint through Blackboard Collaborate, I am sharing the screen, and I'm using the translator in PowerPoint, so it will live transcribe captions of what you're saying. So it's not 100%, and it doesn't do grammar very well, but it's hugely helpful for those of us who need it. You know, I can't listen to things without actually having text and captions as well. Liz? Oh. Oh, I missed a question there.
Yeah, question from Kelly.
Hi, Kelly. Do you feel things have got better or worse during lockdown for disabled students? So I think there's a bit of both. So it really depends. So for many of us who are hard of hearing or deaf, just being able to attend sessions or meetings where you've got captions has been hugely beneficial. Also, where you can see a person's face up close, so you're not in a classroom or a meeting where they're miles away or there's lots of people, so you can't clearly see them, so I can read them better. However, on all sorts of other issues, there have been issues. So being able to access content that you can modify to your specific needs. Mental health issues have been rampant amongst staff and students because of the situation. Being isolated, not being connected is a really, really horrible situation for all of us. So I'm really looking forward to being able to go back in some ways. But we have really benefited an awful lot from everyone having to get to grips to an extent with the technology that we've been trying to get them to get to grips with for years, because the situation forced us to. At the same time, we haven't been given, or we haven't been in the situation where we've had enough support to roll out support to staff and students at the level necessary to get everyone up to speed as quickly as they needed. So many people will have experienced hold-ups and difficulties as a result.
Just a question from Liz. Do you feel funding is cited for some of the establishment technology provision?
Not quite sure what you mean there, Liz. Yeah, go ahead. Can they use the mic?
I could get. Let me see. Where is? Here's Liz here. I'll just. Oh, I think she's left. Liz can't see her.
Let's see. No, she's raising her hand, so I can see it. Liz Angus.
Liz, I think your microphone should be enabled now if you want to ask the question.
Hi, sorry. I was just wondering if in your travels, which are extremely interesting, that there have been cases where technology has not been provided because perhaps they're citing, oh, like JAWS is too expensive or Zoom text is too expensive.
I do think that there are limits. So in our institution, I don't know how many of our students get awarded JAWS. My impression from the students that I've encountered is none of them. It may be the case that they do, but how the decisions are made about that, I don't know by the DSA assessors now. But I do know that certain things have been limited by government. So I wear very dark glasses that have got many layers on for my Erlen syndrome. I've had to fight tooth and nail to get my daughter assessed for that. We're in Wales and I finally got that sorted. But she goes to school in England and we couldn't sort it out through the school in England because the government would no longer recognise that and the DSA recognition for it isn't included anymore. So these kinds of things are really annoying because actually that in my own award was the one that made the biggest difference for me. It was the most successful. I had more expensive things given to me, like an incredibly expensive hearing setup that got used once. Part of its problem was that it was dependent on academic staff using it appropriately, and most of them simply didn't even want to try, never mind use it appropriately. So it just sat there, and I've still got it upstairs now, and I know that cost £7,000. It's an incredible waste, and it wasn't really necessary for what it was doing. We could have made adjustments to the way that things were done in the class that would have sorted that out, and that is often a problem. I often see that it's almost like when you go to your DSA or you go to occupational health, you get the same thing actually, both for staff and students. They have a list of conditions and you are that condition, and then on the other side they have a list of technologies that can solve that condition for you. But it doesn't take into account what your job is. It doesn't take into account how you work. So it's not holistic and it doesn't make sense. They don't know what your job is and they don't know what you're required to do. They don't know what sort of technology you're required to do. You can give them an idea, but it's abstract, so they don't really understand how the two will connect. And that's quite often a problem with the technologies as well, actually. So you get given an assistive technology, but it doesn't work with the institutionally provided technologies you are required to use. So you get these mismatches and these gaps and these holes in information, and it's very, very frustrating. And I increasingly get referrals of staff and students to support with just trying to make things work in those gaps, because there isn't any structure in the system to do that. But to help people survive and get through it, that's all that I can do.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a question from Gilly Shankland. Are you okay to answer that one? Yeah.
What's CYP? Sorry, I'm terrible at acronyms. Gilly, what's CYP stand for? Children and young people, sorry. Blame the dyslexia. I am really bad at acronyms. Have physical disability and struggle to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. This is an enormous barrier both to appropriate courses in the world of work. Yeah. Whilst I better manage CYP, I support are in my experience fully capable. Where do you see the future of FE for this low incidence cohort? I don't know, because I haven't worked in FE now for 7-8 years. At that point, I found it very difficult for my students to get support for anything, and all sorts of things. It was incredibly difficult. And I know the Scottish system is a lot better. You're a lot better developed. You're ahead of the game of us by miles in England and Wales. I can't really answer that question because I simply don't have the experience. It frustrates me to see that that's going on, because it shouldn't be. There are a lot of hidden disabilities, and I understand why people will not realise that there's an issue that needs support. But when people have a physical disability, it should be obvious that it needs support and that there will be difficulties, and that will also be reflected in emotional and mental need of support as well. And I just think it's really, really underserved and undervalued, and the people who do the work in that area are massively underserved and undervalued as well.
Well, thanks to everyone for their comments and their questions, and for coming along today, and especially to you, Ghizzi, for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you. And we'll be sending out the archive link with the PowerPoint and the transcript as well, I think. Did you see, is there a transcript?
Yes, I've
Yeah,
got a transcript
okay.
as well.
Great.
I'll send that to you.
Okay. Well, I think I'll close the session now. So thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's
Thank
been
you
a
for
pleasure.
coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.